Welcome to Now for Someone Completely Interesting. I'm your host, Ben Poulin. My guest has been on my list since the conception of this podcast 2.5 years ago, and for good reason. My last 2 years in radio at the local radio station here in St. Paul, he was my fan. So, of course, that's completely interesting. But besides that, Kevin has had his own career in broadcasting. He was a medic in the Canadian military, a bus driver, an English as a second language teacher, a liquor store manager, a super volunteer, an all-around nice guy who changes cell phone numbers more often than Taylor Swift changes boyfriends. He's now the new business development manager for MCS Net, someone I wish I had worked with back in my radio days, and someone completely interesting, Kevin Bernhardt. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you very much, Ben.
I'm reading through this, and I kind of, because you actually sent me your resume.
Yeah, I wanted to have a list of, look at Mr. Can't Find His Way guy. That's how I describe myself.
But I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking, okay, broadcasting, military, English as a second language teacher. Did any of those three coincide with the tour of duty in Vietnam by any chance?
No.
As I'm reading this, I'm thinking, oh yeah, there's that movie about a guy that did just that.
Yeah, I'm Robin Williams.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me, Kevin. Like I said, there's probably a lot to talk about with even just a couple of those careers that you've had there. But I want to start, let's go where you grew up initially, because I actually don't know a lot about your early life history.
Okay. Well, I actually grew up first 25 years of life, Sherwood Park.
Okay.
So, Alberta boy, not far from here. Great place to grow up. I'm really happy to be the generation that I'm from because I grew up on the bike.
Right.
And I love that part of it. Sherwood Park really wasn't the size it is now. When I was living there, we still had, there's developments now that were just forest when I was there.
Right.
So it was a great place to grow up.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that from other people before that grew up there, probably, I don't want to date you, but probably like 70s, 80s is what I'm thinking, kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember going to the dump with Dad, driving down Baseline Road. It wasn't wide enough for two cars just to pass comfortably.
Wow.
Yeah, you went on the shoulder just a bit.
And now it's a freeway.
Now it's it's huge.
But other people have said how even today it's grown, but they say a small town feel in Sherwood Park still too.
Yeah, when I go home to visit my parents, the neighborhood's the same. The shopping's the same. But I did have a friend though that lived in a newer area of Sherwood Park, and I couldn't find it.
Oh, okay.
Which it felt weird because when I go there, it's the back of my hand. I go to everywhere I know. You just it's second nature, and then to go somewhere in the new area and have trouble finding it felt a little bit strange.
Yeah.
Like I was in a different town all of a sudden.
So born and raised in Sherwood Park, and then I'm looking at your resume. You went through the same broadcasting education I had at NAIT with the Radio Television Arts program from 89 to 91. Did you ever work in radio after that? Because it skips right away into the military.
Yes, and that was probably the hardest little period of time for my parents, was right around the grad of NAIT military, because my dad had just put me through college.
Right.
I had just graduated from college, and I came home. I'm like, and by the way, I'm not doing that. I'm joining the military. And Dad, I remember having to sit down in the basement about that. And, I as a kid that age, I didn't really understand their point of view.
Right.
I just knew I wanted to experience more.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying to Dad in that conversation, I just don't want to be a guy that just has one job his whole life. And I just been constantly changing. So then I did join in between NAIT and when I actually finally got accepted in the military. I took a correspondence course on being a fitness trainer.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. So, and that's not on the resume because that's just never came to be. I just I'm going to take this, and I did get my diploma in that from a correspondence school, really. But and then I'm gone to the military as a medic, not even in communications.
And that's what I was going to ask. So, your military career, I would have assumed you would have got into something with communications. But what made you decide to go the medical side of the?
I had this noble dream of doing something grand. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was much more noble to patch somebody up than to sit behind a radio and you know, send messages. So in my mind at that time, I wanted to do something that really mattered, and that seemed to really matter.
Well, I think it does really.
Yeah.
When you put it that way. Did you? And it doesn't say in your resume, but I mean, we're talking about early '90s, and there was a lot going on globally with Canada on the world scale too. Did you have to deploy a few times as well, or?
The funny part about it is, I wanted to, and I was all set. I even joined in the Navy.
Right.
And my goal was to step my foot on a ship and then 20 years later, step back onto land. That's what in my mind.
Right.
It didn't work out that way because I got posted to static places. My first posting was actually to Ottawa. And then from there, I went to Wainwright.
Right.
And you're not deployed from those places because Ottawa is a support for people coming back injured, of course, because I was at the hospital.
Okay.
So at the time, the hospital is no longer open, but at the time, if you were deployed, you got injured, you came back to Canada, you went there.
Okay.
And then in Wainwright, it's a training base where people train to deploy. And when you're there to support it, they don't draw from that pool.
Okay.
So I did 11 years, and no, I never deployed, unfortunately.
Crazy.
Yes, it is.
I didn't know that about it. I always thought, well, I mean, Wainwright's been there forever. We're proximity to Cold Lake. They deploy all the time. I know people from there, but yeah, it's...
It got to a point, actually, by my 11th year, it started to become a bit of a... Not an issue, but when you're on parade...
Yeah.
And you're with somebody else that has been in the same length of time, and they're weighed down, because every time you go somewhere, you get a medal for that service. You get... Right. You know, to indicate you have been there. And my uniform was essentially empty. And theirs is like, they're standing a little bit lopsided because so it was getting to the point where people were saying, you really need to get somewhere.
Yeah.
So
but I guess I understand the purpose for having you in the situation it was. You need medics even in training situations, but did you ever ask to be moved into more of a...
The funny part was what actually got me out was the possibility.
Oh.
Because I had received finally the notice. I had made what they call the merit list, which means you're about to get promoted. And in the medic field, the hardest jump is from corporal to master corporal. Right. Once you kind of break that threshold, it's kind of like do your time and sergeant will come and next will come and next will come.
Right.
So that's the hardest one. And I had just achieved that. You're on the merit list. You're probably getting that this year. It means a posting to Edmonton, which means boom, deploy. By that time, 11 years had passed and I'd become a family man. I had a son. I had a wife. My wife at the time had just got her nursing license reinstated because she stopped to raise our boy. So he was getting to the age where she could go back to work. So, and I remember having the thought, I don't want him to graduate and he doesn't even know me.
Right.
So life really changed and my focus really changed. Mm-hmm. And the day or just before, it was like let's say the time that 9/11 happened.
Right.
My papers to ask for release were sitting on my desk. So 9/11 happened. And I remember coming home saying, I cannot hand these in right now.
Right.
Like there's no way I'm going into work right now and asking for a release. So that actually held me in for another year or so because I waited for that to settle. And no, I wasn't deployed for that again. I supported the training for that.
Right.
And then when I knew, okay, things have settled, then now I can progress.
It's funny you brought it up because that's exactly what I was thinking. My time frame is like
it was right around
September 11th there. So.
Right around then.
Wow. So just after then you left the military is right around the time you ended up in St. Paul. Is that right?
Pretty close.
Pretty close. Okay.
I left the military and decided to pursue ministry. Yes. That's not on the resume either. Well, yes, it is. Somewhat. Bellevue Bible Camp.
Yes, I was going to say there was a Bible camp that you were a program coordinator there.
Yes. Okay. I started while I was in Wainwright. I volunteered at the Bible camp that my church was with.
Right.
I love camp. Like it was awesome
Right.
because you're working with people.
Mm-hmm.
It started to tap into the part of my personality that I think I'm using now.
Right.
And also that I trained a little bit with radio. It's the interpersonal skills and you know, organizational skills, but just being at camp, you know, running programs. I fell in love with that.
Right.
And so when I put the release in, I remember like, what do you even want to do? I don't know like what I'm going to do, but I think I want to work at camp.
Right.
So then I went to Three Hills. Yes. There's a college in Three Hills that has a program.
Right.
So I took that, and that's what got me here is Bellevue Bible Camp. I was the program coordinator there. In the summer, I ran the mountain bike program and the wall climbing program. And then in the winters, when camp started, they switched to school groups.
Okay.
And so we still did, while the weather permitted, we still did the climbing, the mountain bike, but I also put together an orienteering program so they could use the compass. And then once winter hit, we did snowshoeing and cross-country skiing.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was that phase.
And then obviously, well, you're still not a minister yet, but
No, I'm no, definitely not. Nor have I burst into
flames. So if I'm doing the math, so
fortunately.
we're early 2000s here still, and but now you're in St. Paul.
Yes.
If we want to jump ahead just a little bit then to maybe around that between 2007 2009 range, that's when I was working at the radio station here. And what were you doing at that time? Because I think you were driving the school bus
my
a little bit.
ex-wife was a nurse here in town.
Okay.
And she was the primary earner. When you're at camp, what I discovered, you don't make a very much money.
Welcome to radio.
Exactly. Yeah. Even less.
Yeah.
Yes. So she was the primary.
Okay.
When I stopped camp, I kind of phased out of camp. I had gotten my license for driving bus as a support for what I did at camp.
Okay.
So I could drive people around.
Right.
So I just put that to work, and I drove school bus here for a little while. But we had a small acreage out in the LaFond area, and I essentially flipped it. We took it right down like to the studs. You could see from one corner of the house to the other, right to the studs, rewired it. So I flipped the house, essentially. Right. That's what I did in between.
There you go.
Yeah, in my spare time.
And so it's right around that time that we would have, I don't even want to say we actually met, but more encountered.
We did meet. It's a graphic memory. It blazed in my mind, Ben. You and Steve.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a blast from
So I have two memories because I used to drive the bus and listen to you guys.
Right.
And you and Steve on there. And Steve tried to chug milk. Do you remember that?
No.
Yes. He became convinced that was a myth. Right. And so on the show, he was trying to chug milk. And he made it about 2 segments. And I think you were alone for a little while, and then he came back and he wouldn't sound so good. So
it's funny how because he was up for everything and anything that you put his way, but it's funny how that one didn't. But I mean, there's too many to count.
Probably, yes. And then the memory that is blazoned on my first memory of you, you did a charity, something for charity, and you were auctioning items off.
Yeah,
it was at the Golden Oaks.
Yeah.
Was that what it was? The pool hall.
It was a pool hall right where Warehouse Sports is now. I do remember that.
Okay.
Like this is my memory.
I won that T-shirt. I came in like this super fan. Oh, Ben and Steve. Yeah. Hey, I got the shirt. And you guys are playing pool and you're looking at me like, yeah.
Dude, we signed it too, didn't we?
You signed it. And then you're like, that's great, man. See you later. Like, hey, I met them. Oh. And you were like, can we play pool now, man?
You have to understand, small market radio, you just don't expect it.
Yeah.
Soon after I left radio in about 2009, it wasn't long after that you stepped back into the business then with the radio station here.
Yes.
So without actually working at all in radio, you come in and took over a station manager.
Not quite.
Not quite? Okay.
But again, we'll just touch on the ministry portion and we'll go back a little bit into faith, right?
Sure.
No, this will lead into that. But I do feel that sometimes And, you know, when you have faith, you do strongly believe that there's a force guiding your life.
Right.
And there are times when I feel like he's driving a bulldozer in front of me. And that was one of those times.
Right.
I had really no idea what I was going to be doing. I was a single dad at the time, working at a youth group home, shift work. When he started, you know, grade 10, I wanted to have a day job.
Right.
Didn't know what that was going to be. We had some friends over. We were just randomly talking, and it came up. I had this Nate.
Yeah.
So he says, "You have that, and you're not at the radio station? What's wrong with you?" That kind of lit, you know, what is wrong with me? So I went in, took my resume, dropped it off at the front desk, and Danny called me the next day. "You have this course?" "Yeah." You took this?" "Yeah." So I volunteered.
Right.
For 7 weeks or so. The sales guy left. I was the only applicant that had a set of keys already.
Right.
So I got on there as sales. And in St. Paul, not a ton of sales for two people.
Right.
So it was tight. My first commission job. But I was like, I was happy. It's, you know, steady.
Mm-hmm.
And then another 6 or so months later, Danny leaves. There I am, the manager. And, you know, and like 9 months from having no idea to managing it, it's unbelievable.
I have to say, in that time, though, when you were running the station, that's when I actually became a fan of you. I left radio. I mean, the job itself was, if I could do that for obvious reasons, I would do it. But the money's not there. Oh, so yes. It was hard with raising the family and everything like that. But when I left, I mean, I still really had a vested interest in that radio station. I was really proud to be a part of it. And I always wanted it to do well. And I really thought, and this may take me on a tangent now because it makes me angry, because of all the good work you did and the people that worked with you and for you at the time, made a lot of really good inroads with the community and developed a really good identity with this radio station. And it's so disappointing and heartbreaking to see where it's at right now after all the work you had put into it. Because
I agree.
And I know, you know, not everybody likes the country music format. And I knew a lot of people that listened to the station in spite of that because of the stuff that you guys were doing. There was always, if you wanted to know what was going on and be a part of it, felt like we were there with you guys with every event that was happening. Yeah. So I thought it was just the greatest thing that the station was in that kind of situation. And then don't get me started on
well, it does boil down to, and we are going to talk about somebody we mutually know here in a second, but it does boil down to just that local focus.
Yeah.
And how I love St. Paul and area. And again, we'll just hold off for a second. This gentleman who we're going to talk about in a sec was also very invested. And every announcer that came into that store was told, or to that station was told, it's about local. Mm-hmm. And every news person was told, you know, it is not about what's happening in Ottawa. Yep. It's the fact that a 4-H steer just sold for $50,000. Yes. Or so-and-so just had a record pumpkin. Or like, that's local. Everybody logs into their computer in the morning and they know what Lady Gaga said. They know what happened at the Oscars. They know what happened, you know, in Toronto or whatever is happening. But they want to know here.
Yeah.
Right? So that used to be stressed. And the person we're going to talk about is Kurt.
Right.
Kurt Price.
Okay.
Who was very instrumental in that because he lives and breathes local. Mm-hmm. There is nobody in Lloyd, I think, that's more Lloyd than Kurt.
I think they call him Mr. Lloydminster in some
absolutely.
respects.
So he stressed it. Mm-hmm. And one of my fondest memories, well, not fondest, that's for sure, but I definitely have a memory. And you know we're going to talk about this. And I knew I was going to make it on your show because you started with him and you can only go up, right? So, but he would come to do programming stuff with the announcers, and then we would talk about stuff on the station, and we'd go for lunch to Chinese.
Yeah.
Somehow I always paid. And then we would come back, and he would disappear and utterly decimate the bathroom. Like you couldn't use it for an hour and a half after he was in there. And then And then he would go back to Lloyd. And that was a visit by Kurt.
Sounds about right. And you know what? Whether it's an on-the-job visit like that, or he comes to visit you in your home, it's the same result. He decimates your toilet and then goes back to Lloyd.
It does break my heart a little bit in the fact that I don't even really listen to it now. Local has been lost to dollars, which is really sad.
Well,
and it's a service.
There's not a microphone in that building right now where that studio used to be. It's cleared out. It's a computer that brings in canned goods, I guess you could call it. There's a couple from that do a morning show out of Red Deer, and then the rest is recorded out of either Edmonton or even as far away as Toronto. It's sad, and it's just the stamp of approval for Stingray Broadcasting. I don't like to just vent and throw names out there like that, but I despise that company for what they've done to small market radio. And it's not just St. Paul; it's a lot of small towns around that built up community little radio stations like that don't exist anymore. So, well,
I think we have a similar opinion, but I'm just a slight tangent aside from yours. Is I'm the same opinion. It's sad to see where it's gone. I don't blame Stingray. That's what they do.
Right.
They're a satellite radio company.
Yeah.
Newcap had a chance to create something fabulous. They're ones that owned it when it was they owned a bunch of stations that were all different all over the place. And they were special to whatever town they were in. Right. If you're in Wainwright, you listened to your station. That's right. And you had your announcers and your personalities. And if you were having something at your business and they could come, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And then, they slowly, again, it's the dollar. And they started to and I knew as soon as all the names started changing to line it up. And so now they're selling, we have country stations called this. We have rock stations called this. They were setting it up to,
the cookie cutter format.
Yeah. And which is sad because I loved the Spur. And I think that was as close to a golden, and humbly speaking, as close to a golden age in radio as the town has probably had.
Yeah. Well, being under, the corporate ownership that the radio industry has been on. Like, I mean, every radio station is under a massive corporate ownership in some way or another. So, but back in I guess we'd have to go way back to like 70s and 80s when they were almost all independently owned. But then,
which is funny because an announcer made the same money in the 70s as he did or she in the 90s.
Nobody nobody believes me when I say that.
Yeah.
When I
So it used to be a job that paid sweet. Yeah. And that slowly got eroded too.
Yeah. So
I also have to work at the lumber yard.
Yeah. Well, the guy we talked about, Kurt Price, was the morning show guy in Lloydminster and working part-time at Canadian Tire.
Yeah.
Because
as a manager of a radio station, that would really bother me. It's an image thing, right? It's just your announcer. Yeah. They're held to a certain, you know.
So, but
not that I'm saying there's anything wrong with two jobs, but I'm just saying.
No, but I mean, it's the difference between you want two jobs or you have to have two jobs is really the problem.
Exactly.
So, one day, and I know there's I know it's a good friend of yours and someone I've gotten to know recently. There is kind of campaigning in some way, somehow. We're gonna.
Yes.
I want to go on a side note as this because I'm going to talk about some good friends of yours, is Barry and Linda Sahlstrom.
Yes, they are.
And this was an interesting fact that I learned from Linda. I was having coffee with her a few weeks back. Is that you and Barry were in the military together
in Wainwright?
Yes. How did you both end up in St. Paul? Like, was that planned?
No.
That's crazy to me. That to me was one of the most fascinating.
I'm stalking them.
Well, or vice versa.
I can't. Yeah. Barry's much bigger than me, so I'm going to be very careful here with this. That was completely random. They are from here.
Okay.
So Barry retired from the military, so they came back and almost a family plot.
Yeah.
Right, of land. So they came back to St. Paul. So the fact that they're here is completely organic. Completely, it makes sense.
Right.
I ended up here from a roll of a dice.
Right.
And just happened that the camp that I ended up coming for was here. And then I ended up staying. And the funny thing is there's actually 3 of us that were posted together in Wainwright that are here.
Oh.
So there is another individual who's also here that we run into every once in a while. So there's 3 of us from that same time period.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
One other thing I want to bring up to your volunteerism. I think you're one of probably the most, how do I word it? Volunteer. If that's accurate. And I don't think people recognize that enough. You just always seem to be a part of everything and just under the radar. And I know for ourselves with the Ironhorse Ultra, you've been there for a long time, except for, and we didn't even talk about you being a teacher down in Mexico.
Oh, that's fine.
Oh, geez. You taught English down there.
Briefly.
And we noticed your absence because of how much volunteer work you do, not just with our organization, but others. So I think definitely, at least in some respect, have to publicly recognize that you do a lot of work on your own time, and it's very much appreciated. And I don't think I know you don't go looking for the accolades or anything like that, which is kind of why you just take on the can I say like sometimes the shitty volunteer jobs that nobody else wants to do because you just don't want to have the attention on it. But we notice it.
Well, the funny part is actually the teaching in Mexico does segue to the volunteering aspect, or does, because when my son graduated from high school, he moved to the city and he was taking engineering, and I had decided when he's gone, I wanted to experience, because my wife is from Mexico,
right?
I wanted to experience that culture. So she moved down first,
right?
And I had to try to sell this acreage. It took 3 years to sell the acreage, so we lived apart for 3 years. So in a way, if you picture what people describe as a housing bubble, when prices go up and up and then the bubble breaks. Well, I was in a volunteer bubble for that period of time because I was at that acreage by myself, working at the radio station. So I was super plugged in to begin with, and I had nothing to do at night. I had nobody there really. Yeah. So I'm like, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. So I had these 3 years to really dig.
Right.
Both professionally and personally, because it had kept me busy. Right. And those 3 years probably are what really settled me into the town of St. Paul more than it was unbelievable.
Yeah, you just seem to be everywhere.
I was, just because I wanted to be busy. I liked being busy.
Right.
And then I left. I came back, and I managed a liquor store with Co-op for almost 4 years. Right. Which really impacted the volunteering because the hours there were all over the place. But I still managed to. I held on to the things of importance. The Iron Horse for sure. I love that race. And now that I've moved back into a role that's going to connect me more with community, I'm looking forward to doing more things again.
Good.
Yeah, just getting out.
And let's touch a little bit on that. That's that company in itself is a really great story for the town of St. Paul, because I remember where it started as MCS as the microcomputer store. Yes. They built computers for people, home computers, and that's going way back into the 90s, and now to what they do. They're constantly evolving to what the next technology is in communications, if you will, or computer technology. So you're going to be the
Business Development Manager.
So what does that all entail for you?
Well, I've been in the role now for a week.
Okay.
So, and actually I've kind of come up with a saying that explains it in my mind, because the first couple days were a little daunting. Right. I got to sit in on a couple meetings just to see what's going on, and the technical level is daunting. Mm-hmm. And after a few days, I started feeling like, I don't know, this is so much. But then I just realized what I do is I shake the tree. Okay. That's how I describe it. And that's in my head. What I do is they've hired me to shake the tree. I'm going to go to areas where they already have service or where they want to have service. I just mix and mingle. I shake the tree. And when things fall out of that tree, I pick them up and I give them to the right person at MCS Net to take care of. Wow. So that's how I think of what I've been hired to do.
It's probably a good way to do it. Sometimes just simplify, especially when you're dealing with such a sophisticated technology company.
Yeah.
In that sense. So, but no, I'm pretty excited about to see where that goes as far, because like I said, that company is it's where they are and where they service is well beyond the borders of St. Paul, and that's talking with one of their owners over the last I'd say couple months, and probably have to get him on the podcast too, but I'll
absolutely.
But no, and it's I think it's something that you're well suited for, because business development is about relations with the communities and with the customers too, right? So that's definitely going to be right up your alley. And
and I love the fact, I feel like I have a job where I was hired to just be me.
Yeah. So
that's pretty cool.
It's like working in radio without the radio
cool.
pay.
And I remember I was talking to my boss, her name's Rhonda. We had a great talk the first day just about how special it is to have a company like that in St. Paul. The fact that we can live here and enjoy everything that a small town has to offer, and yet have a job that most people go to the city to get.
Yeah.
And, it's cool. I love it. Like the feel and everything is just really positive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, good. And I think there's some way, somehow we're going to get more insight into this with a guest down the road. So as I wrap things up here, I know you've listened to a couple of these. I'm not sure if you listened to some where this question is coming. It's my last question. You're on a podcast called Now for Someone Completely Interesting, because you are just that. But if you had to recommend someone who was completely interesting, what would a name that comes to mind for you?
Well, they came up a little bit earlier, but I really think Linda Solstrom should be on this show. Yeah.
I kind of had a feeling you'd throw her under the bus.
Right under that bus that I'm driving.
But I think she'd be more than happy to. So I definitely we'll probably bring her in, because she's got a lot of great ideas, and she's doing a lot of great work with the community with the Chamber of Commerce, right?
She's an economic development officer for the area.
She
used to be with the Chamber.
Okay, got you there. So yeah, but and there's a lot of initiatives going on right now that she's a part of that I think would be interesting to bring to light as well. So definitely a good choice to throw her name out there again. So my guest once again is Kevin Bernhardt, a good friend of mine. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, make sure you give us a like and subscription through your favorite podcast provider. You can find us by searching Poolin Radio or Now for Someone Completely Interesting. And of course, he has been just that, Kevin Bernhardt.